Now that you've had an opportunity to begin thinking carefully about your poem for Essay 2 and to take a look at a sample explication essay, I'd like to spend some time considering thesis statements and organization within this type of essay. Let's start by looking back at the sample explication essay that you read on pages 111 to 114 in Reading and Writing About Literature. Take a moment and look back at the essay. Where do thesis statements generally appear in academic essays? Hopefully you all answered the last sentence or two of the introductory paragraph. This is true of most academic essays, and this sample explication essay is no exception. So that means that the thesis statement here is, by balancing negative and positive images and language, this sonnet does a far better job than thousands of songs and poems before and since defining love in all its complexities and contradictions. This is a pretty good thesis statement, and I'd like to point out that it contains two components that are essential for a clear thesis statement in an explication essay. It lays out the stylistic details that the writer will be focusing on, negative and positive images and language, which are highlighted in red here, and it lays out the significance of those details, namely that these details define love in all of its complexities and contradictions. This is highlighted in blue. In this particular thesis, all of the details contribute to a larger overarching effect. This will not always be the case in your thesis statements. Some details may contribute to one effect, while others might be significant for a different reason. Either of these possibilities is fine. The important part, though, is that your thesis both identifies the details you'll be focusing on and lays out the significance or effect of those details. If it's helpful, think back to the tips that I gave you when we worked on Essay 1. If you recall, we broke those thesis statements down into floors. The first floor just stated the facts or made non-controversial observations. In order to create a really good thesis statement, though, you needed to add a second floor to your thesis by making an interpretation or taking a stand on those facts. You do the same thing in this type of thesis statement. The details are the first floor. No informed reader would disagree that Shakespeare's Sonnet 116 contains both negative and positive images and language. But most readers probably won't have considered why that matters. So laying out the significance or effect of those details adds the second floor to your thesis. Let's practice this now with a poem that we've all looked at carefully together. E. E. Cummings' Anyone Lived in a Pretty How Town. If I were writing an explication essay about this poem and I was trying to formulate my thesis statement, I would start by thinking about the details in the poem that I was most interested in. For example, Cummings' word choices, both to describe the actions of the different characters and for naming characters, his imagery, such as sun, moon, stars, rain, spring, summer, autumn, winter, or the images he creates of sowing and reaping, and finally, his use of repetition, both in terms of words and images. Then I would consider what effect those details have or what purpose they seem to serve. After thinking about this for a while, and based on the discussions we had as a class about this poem, it seems to me that Cummings' word choices make anyone and no one seem separate and different from the other townspeople. And his imagery and the use of repetition make it seem like time is passing, plus like the town isn't really changing. Now I need to put these ideas into a clear thesis statement. Here's one example of how to do that. Cummings' unconventional word choices show how different anyone and no one are from the rest of the town. And his use of repetition and imagery show how the town stays the same as time passes. Notice that just like the earlier thesis statement from Reading and Writing About Literature, this thesis also identifies the details I'll be focusing on, unconventional word choice, repetition, and imagery, and it lays out the effect or significance of those details. In this case, The word choices show how different anyone and no one are from the rest of the town, and the repetition and imagery emphasize how the town stays the same even as time passes. Notice, too, how unlike the earlier thesis statement from reading and writing about literature, this thesis highlights different effects of different details. As I said earlier, either way is fine. You just need to make sure that the details you'll be focusing on are clear and that the significance of those details is also clear. So how do you put all of this together in the essay itself? This is a good question. And what I'd like to do now is provide you with some guidelines for how best to organize your essay itself. First, what to avoid. Within your essay, do not simply go through your chosen poem line by line and list the different details worth noting. This is boring, and as Gardner notes, it often starts to sound like nothing more than a summary of the poem. Instead, take Gardner's advice and decide what types of details and effects you want to draw attention to, and then deal separately with the specifics and implications of each feature. This is good advice, but it can be difficult to parse out exactly what Gardner is getting at here. Here's another way of thinking about Gardner's advice that breaks down into two possibilities for organizing your essay. One possibility is to organize by the types of details that you're interested in focusing on. So for instance, this might break down into a paragraph or two on word choice, a paragraph or two on imagery, a paragraph or two on significant sounds, etc. And of course, these are just examples of types of details you might focus on. You should insert whatever types of details you're interested in. Another possibility is organizing your essay by the types of effects you want to highlight. This organization works particularly well if more than one kind of detail has led you to a particular interpretation of something in the poem. In this type of organization, you might have a paragraph or two on details that lead to a particular interpretation of the speaker or another character, a paragraph or two on details that create a certain tone, a paragraph or two on details that lead to a particular reading of the poem or understanding of its meaning, etc. Again, feel free to insert whatever interpretations, effects, or impressions you want to illustrate. Okay, so let's see if we can pull this all together. What are the takeaways from this presentation? First of all, in terms of the essay as a whole, there are different paths it might take. If the details all come together into a meaningful whole, then your essay will be focused on demonstrating this big idea. But it's also okay if you have an essay focused on illustrating several different ideas about the poem, or focused on demonstrating the effects of individual types of details. The important part is that your thesis and each individual paragraph clearly lay out the details you'll be focusing on and the effect or significance of those details.